medications on Pesach. It's a very common question. It comes up every year. A number of people have asked me about it already this year as well. People want to know about taking various types of medicines which may contain chametz. Do they have to be included in the sale of chametz? By the way, anybody who has not yet arranged for mechirat chametz, there'll be an opportunity straight off the maariv. So first of all, let me just say from the outset that a lot of medicines don't contain chametz. And even if they do, people that are on regular medication, certainly for any sort of, for their physical health, for their mental health, certainly things like heart medications and blood medications and any regular prescription which one has to take, one should continue taking throughout Pesach. One can seek medical advice if the situation is where one could stop, or where it does contain chametz and the doctor says that one can that there's a substitute available that would be chametz free, one can do that. But barring that, where that is not an option, there is an important medication that one has to take. This is not right as part of pikuach nefesh. One should continue taking the medication on Pesach. Just want to say that from the outset, so people don't get the wrong idea in case we don't finish the shiur tonight. But let's go through. Certainly, if it's not a life-saving, not a life-saving medication, somebody who may be in the category of a choleh ein bo sakana, or what's called a mechush ba'alma, right? Take tablets for hay fever, for headaches, etc. Those kind of things, which again, as I say, many times they don't have chametz in, and there are lists that you can get, and every year the Badatz puts out a list. The Kupot Cholim have got lists. You can find it on the internet. Most of the medicines you have at home probably don't have chametz in them to begin. However, there are those which do, and the question is, what can we do, or what do we need to do? What do we need to do about this? And we'll break it down into two, because there are two questions, as we know, two separate issues when it comes to chametz on Pesach. There is the issue of eating chametz, which is obviously forbidden, and there is the issue of what is getting benefit from chametz, and the issue of owning the chametz, bali areh or bali matzeh. And eating chametz and bali areh and bali matzeh do not have always the same definitions about them. We discussed this a little bit when we spoke about bedikat chametz. So the first thing is, we have the Mishnah in the second parak of Psachim, beginning of parak Kol Sha'ah, where the Mishnah says Kol Sha'ah shemutar le'achol chametz mutar le'anot. That we know that there's a certain time from whatever hour it is on Erev Pesach when one can no longer eat chametz. The Mishnah says during the time when eating chametz is permitted, it's also permitted to derive benefit from the chametz. Says the Gemara immediately, that's obvious, right? If you can eat it, of course you can get benefit. So says the Gemara, no, it's coming to teach you something else. It's coming to teach you of the case of what's called chercho kodem zmano, meaning that if you had chametz and it was burnt to a crisp during the time, this is during the time when the chametz is still permitted, so it was burnt, it was nifsal, essentially, meaning it was rendered inedible during the time when you were still allowed to benefit from, to eat the chametz, then even later on, since it's been rendered inedible, even later on during the time when chametz is forbidden, you'd still be allowed to benefit from it. Why? Because it's been rendered inedible. It's not chametz anymore in that sense. To what degree is it rendered inedible? So Tosfot says, nifsam achilat kelev, meaning it's no longer fit for consumption by a dog. Does not mean that you have to bring a dog and ask, to check if the dog's willing to eat it or not. It means it's a way of saying that it is inedible for animal consumption, and by extension, inedible for human consumption as well. So that is when we are. That's in terms of owning the chametz. It is not considered chametz anymore for that sense. It's inedible. It's not. There is no transgression of bal yara'eh or bal yamatzeh. So when we come to medicines, we come to tablets and capsules and all sorts of things which really have no taste, which are not considered edible by classic standards. If we're talking about something which has a taste, you get syrups and things like that, which have a sweet taste. And if that has chametz inside, that's going to be a problem, because there it's edible, it has a good taste. This would not apply. But if you're dealing with a capsule, you're dealing with tablets, dealing with the vast majority of medications that don't have a taste or have a bitter taste at best, that would be inedible. That would not be a problem of bal yara'eh or bal yamatzeh in terms of owning it. And therefore, one is not required, tablets and those kind of things, one is certainly not required to sell them and to include them in the mechirat chametz. What about consuming them, ingesting them? What about, is that considered eating? Is that going to be a problem or not? So here we have a machloket rishonim. Because the Gemara says that you can benefit from the chametz, which was chercho kodem zmano. You can benefit from it when it was rendered inedible. Why does it say you can benefit from it, and why does it not say that you can eat it? So the Ran says the reason why the Gemara said that you can benefit from it and not that you can eat it is because it's inedible. Who's going to eat it? Right? It's not something that you would do. However, if you were, for whatever reason, a person decided to take this, whatever it is, the chametz which has been burnt to a crisp, and they decide they like the taste of charcoal, and they're going to eat it, says the Ran, that would still be enachinami, that would still be permitted. That is the same. But we have another opinion. We have the Rosh, we have other Rishonim, and this is the opinion that's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch in Siman Taf Mem Bet, which is the Siman dealing with Ta'arovet Chametz, dealing with mixtures of Chametz. The Shulchan Aruch has got two Simanim that deal with Ta'arovet Chametz, a very complex issue. In Taf Mem Bet, he talks about mixtures of Chametz, essentially before the Chag, as we know, the order of the Shulchan Aruch, the Simanim, it's written in chronological order. So by Ilchot Shabbat, by Ilchot Pesach, by everything, he goes in the order as you encounter these things during the Chag. So Taf Mem Bet talks about regarding Bar Yareh or Bar Yimatzeh, talks about owning mixtures of Chametz, talks about mixtures of Chametz before the Chag. Siman Taf Mem Zayin, a few Simanim later, deals more with Tarovet Chametz during the Chag, in terms of eating, what happens if Chametz got mixed in, etc. So in Taf Mem Bet, the Shulchan Aruch says as follows. He says that if you have Davar Shenitarev Bo Chametz, you have something which has a component of chametz which was mixed into it. But it is not machal adam. It's not edible for human consumption. Or it's not something which everybody eats. He quotes here. This is from the Rambam. Quotes this teriyaka, which is some sort of a lotion, some sort of a. It was used as a medicine on bandages or something. But it contains some chametz, but it's not something that people would go and eat, generally speaking. So he says, even though you are allowed to keep it, you don't have to burn it, you don't have to sell it, you don't have to get rid of it, it's not edible, therefore it's not considered chametz for the purposes of Bar Yareh or Bar Yimatzeh. Nonetheless, you can keep it, you can own it, but you may not eat it. You may not eat it until after Pesach. Why is that? Why can you not eat it? So clearly this is not like the Ran. The Ran would have said you could eat it. But he's going here like the Rosh and the Rambam and others. So the Mishnah Berurah tells us, he says, even though you can maintain it, you cannot eat it, even though it's not actually edible, says, nonetheless, since you ate it, says achshaveh, invokes here a principle, which means you gave it significance. What we are saying is, when the chametz was rendered inedible before Pesach, it was burnt or in whatever other way, it was objectively rendered inedible. But some people, like to eat things that other people don't, and therefore, if you are eating it, you are showing that you don't consider it to be inedible. You consider it edible. You consider it a food. You consider it significant. That's achshaveh. You're giving it chashivut. And therefore, by eating it, you're showing that you no longer consider it to be as dust, as charcoal, or whatever you consider it to be. And therefore you cannot eat it.
Is that only if he takes a piece of bread and makes it achshaveh, and he eats the bread? Or does it mean that when he mixes it into something else, it's still achshaveh?
I don't understand the question. So again?
That means if he takes a piece of bread and he burns it real bad.
Before Pesach.
Before Pesach. So now it's achshaveh, correct?
If he was to take it and eat it.
He's going to eat it.
Definitely.
Right. But what happens when he takes that and he chops it up into fine things and he puts it into something? He either puts it in medication or he puts it into soup and then he eats it. Is that still considered
if he's chopping it up and he's putting it into the food because he wants to eat it, what difference does it make if it's by itself or it's with other things? That's still achshaveh. The question is, however,
once he is actually part of it, is it also by
See, so
Is he now not allowed to own it either?
see, that's a good question. See, meaning yes, right? Meaning once you show that it's considered to you like chametz, so then you wouldn't be probably wouldn't be allowed to own it as well. Although the eating is a greater prohibition than the owning. But the question we have to ask is this: does all of this apply to our medicines? Right? What the Gemara is talking about here, what Shulchan Aruch is talking about, is where you have a food stuff. It was burnt, it was in whatever way it was made inedible, but a person chooses to eat it. Would we say that you have a tablet which contains chametz? Sometimes they have made from wheat starch or the binding agents that come from wheat, come from alcohol, which might be chametz. When a person consumes that, would that be considered achshavei or not? So we don't have very long left now. We'll carry this on tomorrow night, but I want to share with you three approaches, which all of them end up in different ways, which would be allowing these medicines if one needs them. So the first approach is this. We'll just mention number one tonight, and the others we'll do tomorrow. But the question is, the Shagad Arya says like this. He says that this idea of achshavei, it applies whether it's a healthy person or whether it's a sick person. He says, you might have thought that we're saying only when you consume for food because you're interested in the food, because you like the taste and you want to eat it, then it's reawakens the taste of the food, so to speak. You might have thought that just applies for somebody who's healthy and he's eating the food. But if he's only taking this medicine because he has to, because he's eating it, then that would not be achshavei. You might have thought that. He says, no, once you consume it, it is, and therefore it is. It would still apply. That's the Shagad Arya. Not everybody agrees. Tav Sofer disagrees. Rav Moshe Feinstein disagrees. Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva. He says, achshavei, what we're talking about would apply when you're eating. But the person who just wants to get healthy, the person who just wants to take the medicine has no interest in the taste of that food. They have interest in getting better. And therefore, he says, for that reason, it would not apply over here, and you'd be permitted to take the medicine. Okay? There's more to talk about. There's some more approaches to this, but we'll continue tomorrow.